There are some people in this world who walk through life believing they are ordinary. They wake up, they go to work, they come home tired, and they do it all over again the next day. They never stop to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there is something extraordinary hiding inside them. Something waiting for the right moment to come out. Lucia Reyes was one of those people. At 34 years old, she had spent more than a decade working as a night shift nurse at a small hospital in rural New Mexico. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where the same families came in generation after generation, and where the staff felt more like a second family than coworkers. Lucia had seen it all in that hospital. She had held the hands of elderly patients taking their last breaths. She had celebrated with young mothers bringing new life into the world. She had cried in the supply closet when she lost someone she had grown close to, and she had laughed in the break room over cold coffee and bad jokes. But nobody at that hospital knew about the old piano sitting in her living room. It had belonged to her grandmother, a woman named Dolores, who had passed away when Lucia was just 23. Dolores had been the kind of woman who believed music could heal anything. A broken heart, a tired soul, a restless mind. She used to say that when words failed, music spoke. And she had tried her best to pass that belief down to her granddaughter. When Lucia was a little girl, she would sit beside her grandmother on that old wooden bench, watching those weathered hands move across the keys. Dolores never played anything fancy. She did not know how to read sheet music, and she had never taken a single lesson in her life. But she could create melodies that made people stop whatever they were doing and just listen. Simple tunes, gentle rhythms, the kind of music that felt like a warm blanket on a cold night. She taught Lucia a few things before she passed. Basic chords, simple patterns, a short melody that Dolores had made up herself. Just 5 notes repeated in a soft, slow rhythm. It was nothing special, Dolores always said. Just something to play when the world felt too heavy. After her grandmother died, Lucia could not bring herself to touch the piano. Every time she looked at it, she saw Dolores sitting there, smiling, humming along to her own music. The memories were too painful, so she covered it with a sheet, pushed it into the corner of her living room, and tried to forget it was there. Years passed. Life got busy. Lucia threw herself into her work, finding purpose in caring for others. She moved her aging mother, Rosa, into her small house when Rosa's health began to decline. Between 12-hour shifts at the hospital and looking after her mother at home, Lucia barely had time to sleep, let alone think about music. The piano stayed in the corner, untouched. Gathering dust. And came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday in late October. The air outside was cold and dry, and the hospital had been unusually quiet for most of the evening. Lucia had been assigned to care for an elderly man named Mr. Delgado, a retired schoolteacher who had been admitted 3 weeks earlier. His condition had been getting worse, and everyone knew he did not have much time left. Over those 3 weeks, Lucia had grown fond of him. He had a gentle way of speaking, and he always asked her about her day before she could even ask about his. He told her stories about his late wife, about the students he had taught over 40 years, about the garden he used to tend before his hands became too weak. He never complained, not once, even when the pain became unbearable. That Thursday night, Lucia was sitting beside his bed, checking his vitals, when he reached out and took her hand. "You have kind eyes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just like my wife did." Lucia smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "You should rest, Mr. Delgado." He shook his head slowly. "I have rested enough. I am ready now." She stayed with him for the next 2 hours. She held his hand, she talked to him softly, and she made sure he was not alone. When he finally passed, Peacefully, just before midnight, Lucia felt something break inside her. She had lost patience before. It was part of the job, and she had learned how to cope with it over the years. But there was something different about Mr. Delgado. Maybe it was the way he had accepted his fate with such grace. Maybe it was the stories he had shared, the life he had lived, the love he still carried for people who were no longer there. Whatever it was, his death hit her harder than she expected. She finished her shift in a daze. She drove home as the sun began to rise, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her mind replaying those final moments over and over again. When she walked through her front door, the house was silent. Her mother was still asleep. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Lucia sat down on the couch, still in her scrubs, still wearing her badge. She stared at the wall, trying to process what she was feeling. Grief, exhaustion, a strange emptiness that she could not put into words. And then her eyes landed on the piano dot. It was still there in the corner, covered by the same white sheet that had been draped over it for nearly 11 years. She did not know what made her stand up and walk toward it. She did not know what made her pull the sheet away, revealing the dusty keys underneath. But something was pulling her, something she could not explain. She sat down on the old bench. The wood creaked beneath her weight, just like it used to when she was a little girl sitting beside her grandmother. She placed her fingers on the keys, and they felt cold and unfamiliar. For a long moment, she just sat there, not playing anything, just breathing. Then she pressed a key. A single note rang out in the quiet house, soft and clear. And then another, and another. Without thinking, she began to play the melody her grandmother had taught her all those years ago. 5 notes, repeated slowly, gently. It was nothing complicated. It was nothing that would impress anyone who knew anything about music. But as she played, something began to shift inside her. The grief she had been carrying all night started to move. It rose up from somewhere deep in her chest, and instead of staying trapped inside, it began to flow out through her fingers. She added a chord beneath the melody, then another. She slowed the rhythm down, letting each note hang in the air a little longer. She closed her eyes and stopped thinking altogether. She was not playing for anyone. She was not trying to create anything. She was just letting out everything she could not say, the sadness of losing Mr. Delgado, the exhaustion of years spent caring for others while forgetting to care for herself, the grief she had never fully processed after her grandmother died, the fear of watching her own mother grow weaker every day. All of it came pouring out, note by note, chord by chord, in a melody that seemed to write itself. She played for almost an hour, alone in the dark, with tears streaming down her face. When she finally stopped, her hands were trembling. The house was still silent. The sun was fully up now, pale light streaming through the curtains. Lucia looked down at her hands, still resting on the keys, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt lighter. She did not know it yet. But that night, in that quiet living room, something had been born. Something that would soon travel far beyond those walls. Something that would touch the hearts of millions of people she would never meet. But in that moment, she was just a tired woman sitting at her grandmother's piano, playing through her pain, with no idea what was coming next. Lucia did not tell anyone about that night at the piano. Not her mother, not her co-workers, not a single soul. It felt too personal, too raw, like a secret between her and the empty room. She went back to her routine the next day, working her shifts, caring for her mother, sleeping when she could. Life continued the way it always had, but something had changed. Every few nights, when the house was quiet and sleep refused to come, she found herself sitting at that old piano again. She never planned it. She would just wake up in the middle of the night, restless and heavy with thoughts, and her feet would carry her to that corner of the living room. She would sit down, place her fingers on the keys, and let whatever was inside her come out. She kept playing that same melody, the one her grandmother had taught her. But each time she played it, it grew a little longer, a little deeper. She added new parts without really thinking about it. A soft passage here, a pause there. Sometimes she would play the same phrase over and over, changing it slightly each time until it felt right. She did not know what she was doing. She had no training, no understanding of music theory, no idea if what she was creating was good or bad. She just played dot. It became her secret ritual, her way of breathing when the world felt too tight. What she did not know was that someone had been listening. Her niece, Valentina, had come to stay with her for the summer. Valentina was 17 years old, the daughter of Lucia's younger brother, and she had been going through a difficult time. Her parents were in the middle of a messy separation, and the tension at home had become unbearable. So Lucia offered to take her in for a few months, give her a quiet place to stay, a break from all the fighting. Valentina was a quiet girl. She kept to herself most of the time, spending hours on her phone, scrolling through videos, texting friends back home. She and Lucia got along well enough, but they did not talk much. Lucia was too tired most days, and Valentina seemed to prefer her own company. But Valentina had trouble sleeping too. One night, about 3 weeks after she arrived, Valentina woke up around 2 in the morning. The house was dark and still, but she could hear something. A faint sound coming from downstairs. At first, she thought it was the television, left on by accident. But as she listened more carefully, she realized it was music. Piano music. She got out of bed and crept down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The door to the living room was slightly open, and a thin sliver of moonlight spilled through the gap. She pushed it open just a crack and looked inside. There was her aunt sitting at the old piano in the corner. The room was dark, except for the pale glow of the moon coming through the window. Lucia's eyes were closed, and her hands moved slowly across the keys, playing a melody so soft and sad that Valentina felt her breath catch in her throat. She had never heard anything like it. It was not fancy. It was not complicated. But there was something about it that made her chest ache. Something that made her think of all the things she had been trying not to feel. Her parents. The fights. The way her mother cried when she thought no one was listening. The way her father had looked at her the last time she saw him, like he wanted to say something but could not find the words. Valentina stood there in the doorway, frozen, watching her aunt play. She did not make a sound. She barely even breathed. And without really thinking about what she was doing, she pulled out her phone and hit record. She recorded for about 90 seconds, just long enough to capture the heart of the melody. Then she slipped back upstairs before Lucia could notice she had been there. The next morning, Valentina sat on her bed, watching the video over and over again. The quality was not great. The lighting was dark, and you could barely see Lucia's face. But the music came through clearly, haunting and beautiful, and every time Valentina listened to it, she felt that same ache in her chest. She thought about her aunt. How hard she worked. How tired she always looked. How she never complained, never asked for anything, never talked about herself. And here she was, in the middle of the night, creating something this beautiful, and nobody even knew. It did not seem fair. Before she could talk herself out of it, Valentina uploaded the video to her social media account. She did not think much of it. She had a few hundred followers, mostly friends from school, and some random people she had never met. She typed a simple caption beneath the video. "My aunt doesn't know she's a genius." Then she put her phone down and forgot about it. By that evening, The video had 1,000 views. Valentina noticed it while scrolling before bed, and she thought it was strange. She had never gotten that many views on anything before. She checked the comments and saw messages from strangers saying things like, "This is beautiful. And who is she?" And I'm crying. She showed it to Lucia at dinner, a little nervously. "I hope you're not mad," she said. "I recorded you playing last night, and I posted it online. And ... a lot of people have seen it." Lucia stared at the screen, her face pale. She watched herself playing in the dark, listened to the melody she had thought was hers alone, and felt her stomach turn. 1,000 people had heard that. 1,000 strangers had witnessed something she never meant to share. "Take it down," she said quietly. "Please." Valentina nodded quickly and reached for the phone. But when she opened the app, she froze. The video now had over 50,000 views. By the next morning, it had crossed 200,000. By the end of the week, it had been shared more than 1,000,000 times. The comments kept pouring in. Thousands and thousands of them. People from all over the world, writing in different languages, saying the same thing over and over again. "This song saved me. I played this at my mother's funeral. I have listened to this 100 times and I still cry. Where can I find more of her music? Who is this woman?" News outlets started picking it up. A local television station ran a short segment about the mysterious piano player from New Mexico. Then a bigger station picked it up. Then another. Suddenly, Lucia's face was everywhere. Reporters were calling the hospital, trying to get interviews. A journalist showed up at her front door with a camera crew. Lucia refused to speak to any of them. She was not a musician. She was not a performer. She was just a tired nurse who played piano in the middle of the night because she did not know what else to do with her sadness. The idea that millions of people had now heard that sadness, had witnessed something so private, made her feel exposed in a way she could not explain. She asked Valentina again to delete the video. But Valentina, tears in her eyes, showed her the messages that kept coming in. Hundreds of them. From people who were grieving. From people who were struggling. From people who said the music had helped them in ways they could not put into words. One message stood out. It was from a woman in Argentina whose husband had just passed away. She wrote that she had been unable to cry for days, completely numb, until she heard Lucia's melody. And then, finally, the tears came. She thanked Lucia for giving her permission to feel. Lucia read that message 3 times. Then she sat down on the couch and stared at the wall for a long time. She did not understand any of this. She did not understand how 5 simple notes, played in the dark by a woman who did not know what she was doing, could travel across oceans and touch the hearts of strangers. It did not make sense to her, but maybe it did not have to make sense. Maybe some things just are. That night, Lucia sat at the piano again. She did not play. She just sat there, her hands resting on the keys, thinking about all those people out there who had heard her grief and felt something. Thinking about her grandmother, who always said that music could heal anything. Maybe Dolores had been right, and maybe, just maybe, this was not something to be afraid of, that it was something to listen to. The phone calls did not stop. The emails kept coming. Interview requests, collaboration offers, messages from record labels and television producers and podcast hosts. Lucia ignored all of them. She went to work, she came home, she cared for her mother, and she pretended that none of it was happening. But it was happening. And no matter how hard she tried to look away, the world kept knocking at her door. 3 weeks after the video went viral, a letter arrived in the mail. Not an email, not a text message. An actual handwritten letter, tucked inside a simple white envelope with no return address. Lucia almost threw it away without opening it. She had been receiving all kinds of strange mail lately, and most of it went straight into the trash. But something about this one felt different. The handwriting on the front was careful and neat, and her name was spelled correctly, which was more than she could say for most of the others. She opened it at the kitchen table while her mother napped. In the next room, the letter was from a man named Raymond Chun. He introduced himself as a music producer who had been working in the industry for over 20 years. He had produced albums for some well-known artists, though Lucia did not recognize any of the names he mentioned. He wrote that he had seen her video, like millions of others, but unlike most of those people, he had not been able to stop thinking about it. He did not use fancy words or make big promises. He simply said that what she had created was something rare, something real, and he wanted to help her share it with the world. If she was willing, at the bottom of the letter, he left his phone number and a single sentence that stuck with her long after she put the paper down. You don't have to be a musician to make music that matters. Lucia folded the letter and set it aside. She told herself she would not call. She was not a performer. She was not an artist. She was a nurse who played piano in the dark to cope with her grief. That was all. The idea of walking into a recording studio, of being treated like some kind of professional, made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. But the letter stayed on the kitchen table, and every time she walked past it, she found herself reading that last line again. You don't have to be a musician to make music that matters. Her mother found the letter. A few days later, Rosa was 71 years old and moved slowly these days, her joints stiff and her memory not quite what it used to be. But her mind was still sharp when it mattered, and she had always been able to see right through her daughter. What is this? Rosa asked, holding up the letter. Lucia tried to brush it off. Nothing. Just someone who saw the video. Rosa read the letter slowly, her lips moving slightly as she worked through the words. When she finished, she looked up at Lucia with an expression that was hard to read. Your grandmother would have called him back by now. Lucia felt something twist in her chest. Mama, I'm not abuela. I don't know what I'm doing. I just play because it helps me feel better. That's all. Rosa set the letter down and reached for her daughter's hand. Her fingers were thin and cool, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Mia, do you remember what your grandmother used to say? When words fail, music speaks. You think what you played that night was just for you? You think all those people who listened, all those strangers who cried, you think that was an accident? Lucia shook her head, not in disagreement, but in confusion. I don't know what it was. It was a gift, Rosa said softly. A gift from your grandmother, passed down to you. And now the world is asking you to share it. Are you really going to say no? That night, Lucia could not sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her mother's words over and over again. A gift? Was that what it was? She had never thought of herself as someone with a gift. She had always been practical, hard-working, focused on what was in front of her. Dreams and talents and big possibilities were for other people, not for her. But then she thought about the messages. The woman in Argentina, the man in Canada who wrote that he played the video for his dying father, a teenager in Japan who said the melody helped her through the darkest night of her life. Real people, real pain. And somehow her music had reached them. Maybe it was not about her at all. Not the next morning. She called the number at the bottom of the letter. Raymond answered on the second ring. His voice was calm and warm, not pushy or aggressive like she had expected. He did not pressure her or make any demands. He simply asked if she would be willing to come to his studio in Los Angeles for one weekend, just to see what it felt like, just to try. If you hate it, you never have to do it again, he said. But I think you owe it to yourself to find out. 2 weeks later, Lucia boarded a plane for the first time in over a decade. The studio was in a quiet part of the city, tucked away on a side street lined with palm trees. It did not look like much from the outside, just a plain brick building with a small sign by the door. But when she stepped inside, she felt like she had entered another world. The main room was filled with equipment she did not recognize. Microphones, soundboards, computers with glowing screens, cables running in every direction. In the center of it all sat a grand piano, black and polished, gleaming under the soft lights. Lucia froze in the doorway. Raymond walked over and stood beside her. He did not say anything at first. He just let her take it all in. "It's just a room," he said finally. "And that's just a piano. The magic isn't in the equipment. It's in you." She wanted to believe him. But as she sat down at that grand piano, her hands began to shake. The keys felt different under her fingers, smoother, colder. The sound was bigger, fuller, echoing off the walls in ways she was not used to. She pressed a few notes and winced at how loud they seemed. "I can't do this," she whispered. Raymond pulled up a chair and sat beside her. Not too close, just near enough that she did not feel alone. "You're not performing for anyone," he said. "There's no audience, no camera, no pressure. Just close your eyes and play the way you do at home. Pretend you're back in your living room. Pretend it's the middle of the night and the world is asleep." Lucia closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. And she tried. The first attempt was a disaster. Her fingers stumbled over notes she had played 100 times before. The rhythm was off. The emotion was buried under layers of fear and self-doubt. She stopped halfway through and put her face in her hands. "I told you," she said. "I'm not a real musician." Raymond did not argue with her. He just sat there quietly for a moment, then asked a simple question. "Who were you thinking about the first time you played this?" Lucia looked up. "What?" "The night you played this piece for the first time. Who were you thinking about?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then softly she answered, "A patient. An old man I took care of. He died that night." Raymond nodded slowly. "And your grandmother? The one who taught you the melody? Her too. Then think about them now. Not about the studio. Not about me. Not about anything else. Just them." Lucia turned back to the piano. She placed her fingers on the keys. She closed her eyes and let the faces come. Mr. Delgado, with his gentle smile and tired eyes. Her grandmother, sitting beside her on that old wooden bench, humming along to her own music. Her mother, growing weaker every day, still believing in her daughter, even when Lucia could not believe in herself. And then she began to play. This time, something shifted. The fear did not disappear completely, but it moved aside, making room for something deeper. The notes came slowly at first, then faster, then slower again, rising and falling like breath. She forgot where she was. She forgot who was listening. She was back in her living room, back in the dark, back in that place where the music had first found her. When she finished, the room was silent. She opened her eyes and saw Raymond staring at her, his expression unreadable. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly what the world needs to hear." They spent the entire weekend recording. Lucia played the piece over and over again, sometimes making small changes, sometimes keeping it exactly the same. Raymond never rushed her. He never told her what to do or how to do it. He just listened, adjusted a few things on his equipment, and let her find her own way. By Sunday evening, they had something finished. Raymond played it back for her through the studio speakers, and Lucia sat in silence, listening to her own music as if hearing it for the first time. It sounded different than it had in her living room, fuller, richer, but still unmistakably hers. Still that same simple melody her grandmother had taught her, now stretched and shaped into something that felt complete. "What do you want to call it?" Raymond asked. Lucia thought for a moment. She thought about Mr. Delgado and the way he had let go so peacefully. She thought about her grandmother and all the things she had never gotten to say before she passed. She thought about her mother, slowly fading, and how hard it was to watch someone you love slip away. "Lullaby for the letting go," she said quietly. Raymond nodded. "That's perfect." They released the song 2 weeks later. No record label, no marketing campaign, no fancy music video or publicity stunts. Just a simple upload to streaming platforms with a short description that Raymond helped her write. It said that the piece was dedicated to everyone who had ever loved someone and had to say goodbye. Lucia flew back to New Mexico and returned to her normal life. She worked her shifts at the hospital. She cared for her mother. She tried not to think too much about what might happen next. Part of her expected nothing to happen at all. The viral video had been a fluke, a strange moment that had already passed. Surely the world had moved on to the next thing by now, but the world had not moved on. Within the first week, the song had been streamed over 500,000 times. By the end of the month, that number had climbed to 10 million, then 20 million, then 50 million. It spread in ways that Lucia could not have predicted, reaching corners of the world she had never even thought about. Hospices began playing it for patients in their final hours. Nurses and caregivers wrote to Lucia, saying that the music helped people pass more peacefully, that families held hands and cried together while it played. That something about those simple notes made the hardest moment of their lives a little easier to bear. Therapists started recommending it to clients who were struggling with grief. Support groups played it during their meetings. Funeral homes added it to their playlists. A hospital in Germany used it in their palliative care unit and reported that patients who listened seemed calmer, more at ease. None of this made sense to Lucia. She was just a nurse. She had no training. She had no idea what she was doing when she sat down at that piano. And yet somehow, this thing she had created was traveling across oceans, slipping into the most intimate and painful moments of strangers' lives, and offering them something she could not explain. Then came the documentary. Filmmaker named Andres Morales had been working on a project about grief and loss for nearly 3 years. He had traveled to different countries, interviewing people who had lost loved ones, trying to capture the universal experience of saying goodbye. The film was almost finished, but something was missing. He could not find the right music to tie it all together. Everything he tried felt either too dramatic or too hollow. Then his editor played him Lucia's song. Andres listened to it once and knew immediately that this was what he had been searching for. He reached out to Raymond, who put him in touch with Lucia. After a long phone conversation, she agreed to let him use the piece in his film. The documentary premiered at a film festival in Toronto 6 months later. It received a standing ovation. Critics called it one of the most moving films of the year, and almost every review mentioned the music. They described it as haunting and beautiful. They said it elevated the entire film. They said it was the kind of music that stayed with you long after the credits rolled. The documentary went on to win several awards, including honors at festivals in Europe and South America. And everywhere it played, people asked the same question. Who wrote that song? Who is the woman behind that melody? Lucia watched all of this unfold from her small house in New Mexico, feeling like she was observing someone else's life. She still worked at the hospital. She still changed bedpans and checked vitals and held the hands of patients who were scared. Her coworkers treated her the same as always, though sometimes they would smile at her a little differently, like they were in on some kind of secret. The letters kept coming. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. People wrote from every continent, in languages Lucia could not read, though many were translated by kind strangers who wanted to make sure she understood. The stories were all different, but they carried the same thread. A father in Brazil wrote that he played the song every night while sitting beside his daughter's empty bed. She had passed away from an illness the year before, and the music helped him feel close to her again. A woman in South Korea said she had been unable to cry for months after her husband's sudden death. She felt frozen, trapped inside her own body. Then she heard the song, and something broke open inside her. She cried for hours. She said it was the first time she had felt alive since he died. A teenager in England wrote that he had been struggling with dark thoughts for a long time. He did not go into details, but he said that one night, when everything felt hopeless, he stumbled across the song by accident. He listened to it on repeat until the sun came up. He said it did not fix anything, but it made him feel like someone understood. And that was enough to get him through the night. Lucia read every single letter. She kept them in boxes under her bed, organized by country, tied together with rubber bands. Some nights, when she could not sleep, she would pull out a handful and read them again, reminding herself that this was real. That somehow, something she had created in her darkest moment had reached people in theirs. Music critics began writing about her. They used words she did not fully understand. They talked about minimalism and emotional resonance and the power of simplicity. They compared her to composers she had never heard of. They called her an untrained genius, a natural talent, a once-in-a-generation voice. Lucia did not know what to do with any of that. She did not feel like a genius. She did not feel like a voice. She just felt like herself, a tired woman who missed her grandmother and worried about her mother and tried her best to help people through the hardest moments of their lives. But maybe that was exactly the point. Maybe the reason the music touched so many people was because it came from someone who was not trying to be anything, someone who was not performing or pretending, someone who simply sat down in the dark and let her heart speak through her fingers. One evening, after a long shift at the hospital, Lucia came home to find her mother sitting in the living room, listening to the song on an old radio Valentina had set up for her. Rosa's eyes were closed, and there were tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. Lucia sat down beside her and took her hand. "You did good, Mia," Rosa whispered. "Your grandmother would be so proud." Lucia did not say anything. She just sat there, holding her mother's hand, listening to her own music fill the room. For the first time in a very long time, she let herself believe that maybe her mother was right. Maybe she had done something good after all. The offers kept coming. Record labels wanted to sign her. Concert halls invited her to perform. Television shows asked her to appear as a guest. A famous singer wanted to collaborate. A streaming platform offered her a deal worth more money than she had ever seen in her life. Lucia turned down almost all of them. It was not that she was ungrateful. She understood how rare this kind of opportunity was, and she did not take it lightly. But she also understood something about herself that the rest of the world did not seem to grasp. She was not meant to be a celebrity. She was not meant to stand on stages under bright lights, performing for crowds of strangers. That was not who she was. That was not where her music came from. Her music came from quiet rooms and sleepless nights. It came from grief and love and memories that lived deep inside her bones. If she turned it into a career, if she started chasing fame and money and applause, she was afraid she would lose the very thing that made it real. So she made a choice that surprised almost everyone who knew her story. She kept her job at the hospital. Her coworkers thought she was crazy. Her brother called her stubborn. Even Raymond, who had believed in her from the beginning, gently suggested that maybe she was letting fear hold her back. But Lucia knew it was not fear. It was clarity. She had spent her whole life caring for people, sitting with them in their darkest hours, helping them find comfort when comfort seemed impossible. That was her gift. That had always been her gift. The music was just another way of doing the same thing. Why would she walk away from that? So she stayed. She continued working her night shifts, continued checking on patients, continued holding hands and wiping tears, and doing all the small, invisible things that nurses do every single day. And when she came home, when the house was quiet and her mother was asleep, she would sit at her grandmother's piano and play. She did not try to write hits or create masterpieces. She just let the music come, the same way it always had. Sometimes a new melody would appear, soft and slow, born from whatever she was feeling that night. Sometimes she would play the same piece over and over, finding new details she had never noticed before. She recorded some of it. Most of it she kept to herself. Over the next 2 years, she released 3 more songs. Each one was simple. Each one was quiet. And each one found its way into the hearts of people who needed it most. They were not massive commercial successes. They did not top any charts or win any awards. But they mattered to the people who listened. And that was enough for Lucia. The money from her music, which was more than she had expected, went towards something she had been thinking about for a long time. She started a foundation in her grandmother's name, the Dolores Reyes Music Foundation. Its purpose was simple: to bring music therapy and piano lessons to children in underserved communities. Kids who would never have the chance to touch a piano otherwise. Kids who might have something inside them, just like Lucia had, waiting to come out. The foundation started small, working with a few schools in rural New Mexico. But it grew quickly, fueled by donations from people who had been touched by Lucia's story. Within 2 years, they had programs in 12 states and 3 countries. Thousands of children were learning to play, learning to express themselves, learning that they did not need fancy training or expensive equipment to make music that mattered. Lucia visited the programs whenever she could. She would sit with the kids, listen to them play, and tell them the same thing over and over again. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. She started giving talks too. Not concerts. Not performances. Just small gatherings where she would share her story and answer questions. She spoke at nursing conferences, at music therapy workshops, at schools and community centers. She talked about imposter syndrome and self-doubt. She talked about how she had spent most of her life believing she was ordinary, believing she had nothing special to offer. She talked about how wrong she had been. The world is full of people who think they're not good enough, she would say. People who have something beautiful inside them, but are too scared to let it out. I was one of those people. And I'm telling you, whatever you have inside you, whatever you're afraid to share, the world needs it. Even if it's messy. Even if it's simple. Even if you think no one will care, someone will. Someone out there is waiting for exactly what you have to give. People always asked her the same question. How did you do it? How did a nurse with no training create a piece of music that touched millions of people? And she always gave the same answer. I didn't try to create a masterpiece. I just played what I felt. Sometimes the simplest truth is the most powerful thing you can offer. Her mother passed away on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Rosa had been declining for months, her body slowly giving out, but her spirit had stayed strong until the very end. Lucia was beside her when it happened, holding her hand, whispering words of love and gratitude. The last thing Rosa said before she closed her eyes was, "Play for me, Mia." That night, Lucia sat at the piano and played for hours. She played the melody her grandmother had taught her. She played the songs she had written over the years. She played things she had never played before, melodies that came from somewhere she could not name. She played until her fingers ached and her tears ran dry, and the first light of dawn crept through the window. It was the most honest music she had ever made. She did not record it. She did not share it with anyone. Some things are not meant for the world. Some things are just between you and the people you love, even when they are gone. Months later, a journalist came to interview her for a magazine article. He asked her what she had learned from everything that had happened. From the viral video, the awards, the letters, the foundation, all of it. Lucia thought for a long moment before answering. I learned that healing comes in many forms, she said. I spent years healing people with my hands, checking their vitals, giving them medicine, holding them when they were scared. But music heals too, maybe in a different way, maybe in a deeper way. I don't fully understand it. I just know it's true. The journalist asked one final question. What was next for her? Lucia smiled. Same thing as always. Go to work. Take care of people. Come home. Sit at the piano. See what comes out. She still lives in that same small house in New Mexico. She still works at the hospital, though she has cut back her hours a little. She still reads every letter that arrives, still keeps them in boxes under her bed, still cries sometimes when she reads about the lives her music has touched. And every night, when the world is quiet and the stars are out, she sits at her grandmother's piano and plays. The bench still creaks beneath her weight. The keys are worn smooth from years of use. But the music that fills that room is alive and breathing, carrying with it the memory of everyone she has loved and lost. Her grandmother, her mother, Mr. Delgado, all the patients she has cared for over the years, all the strangers who wrote to tell her that her music helped them through the darkest nights of their lives. They are all there, in every note. And the piano no longer gathers dust.